good morning, and welcome to the Morning Flare with yours truly, Coach Mo. Hey, today I wanted to talk to you about assumptions and what does that mean? I'm talking about assumptions from the perspective of situations where you assume a certain perspective to be true and it limits your potential. So assumptions, when it shows up in our thinking, right? Sometimes we're unaware of certain circumstances where we just naturally assume, and because we naturally assume, we're projecting out certain judgments and certain perspectives, certain points of view towards a situation that might actually limit our potentials. So how exactly does assumptions show up? Well, assumptions show up in a way that because something happened yesterday, you may perceive it's going to happen in the future. So a brief example of that might be when, let's say, you're in a meeting, right? And you have this manager just kind of cuts you off, right? And you may assume that this person is rude, right? And as the situation in a future meeting comes up, there may be an assumption based on this person being rude because you're assuming the behavior that he did last time or she did last time. You're assuming that it's going to replicate that same behavior in this next meeting going forward. And so as you show up in this meeting, now you're going to limit your engagement because you're assuming that if you speak up, this person might just cut you off. And that's just a simple example. But assumptions really comes around with judgment. You're placing judgment on a certain circumstance, situation before it actually even happens. And that's based through your own personal experience, your background, your upbringing. All of these different factors contribute towards an assumption that may be going on in a particular situation. Well, how do you overcome that? How do you challenge that? How do you get past assumptions when you at times don't even know that you are assuming something in that situation? Well, the easiest way is to ask an open-ended question, right? Because then when you ask an open-ended question, in that moment that you're potentially assuming, you get validation for what that other person's actions might be because they would potentially answer that question, and the information from that can allow you to be present to listen so that you're not in a position to assume. So that's one way. The other way is coaching, and how you're showing up in those situations. A coach like yours truly can just kind of walk you through and talk through that situation and those moments to discover that there's an assumption that might exist in that situation that's limiting you from moving forward. So another great example around assumptions is fear, right? Because fear, I characterize it as a flawed element of thought appearing to be real. Now think about that, right? Assumption can be triggered by fear. So when you think of fear, right? Fear is a thought of something that you're projecting a certain outcome that's potentially is going to happen in which you have to protect yourself. And so that's where the fear starts to come from. But it's all assumption based because as you look into the future, you may feel that it's unknown of what's potentially going to happen. So you're going to assume that this is going to be the potential outcome, right? And because you're assuming it, you have this feeling that it's not going to work out too good. It's not going to be a great outcome with that. And that's where fear starts to come up. But it's because you're assuming, right? And the best way another way to overcome that is through action. You just take action, and that can start to help limit your assumptions. But there's so much that we can talk about when it comes to assumptions. But I really do appreciate you tapping in to just to learn a little bit about the things that I help people work through, which is assumptions. But I appreciate you. I hope this gets your day going. Something to think about around assumptions. So, what are your assumptions as you go throughout your day? What assumptions are coming up? What are you perceiving to be true because of yesterday, things of a certain situation that you're projecting out in the future? And an assumption can also create, like I mentioned, a little bit of that fear and how that's showing up for you. But it can be, and that fear could be based through that past experience of an assumption that you're projecting to come to reality in the near future. But thank you for joining me. Appreciate you. Catch you next time.